I've always been very active in injustice issues. Life of the Land was an organization founded in 1970. One of our early actions was to sue the Navy for bombing Pahoa in '71. We also sued HECO on their rate hike in 1971 and won it before the Supreme Court in '75. They had asked the Public Utilities Commission to have ratepayers pay for an ad campaign to ask ratepayers to consume more electricity. The PUC had agreed, and the Supreme Court said no. I came to the organization in '94, principally, and got involved in a lot of military cleanup work. But in the around '96, two local groups approached me and said, "We have this transmission line fight. Can you help us out with it?" And so I've been involved with energy since '96. That was a fight on Vahila Ridge on Oahu. And I don't know, this would be better, I think. That was a fight that Hawaiian Electric waged against the community for 30 years. And there was an enormous community uprising that stopped it in the '70s. So HECO just waited out a few years and came back with it in the '90s. Sort of like geothermal. It pops up, disappears, and now it's popping up again. The original plan, industrialization of Puna. One of the tactics we used on the power line fight is to figure out how many different groups we could get to unite with us. How many different businesses, churches, community associations, neighborhood boards, different kinds of organizations, both within the area and in other parts of the state, would join together and say no. Because what agencies really listen to are people and organizations. They get nervous when they see a lot of people getting together, and they get nervous when they see a lot of organizations pushing a certain agenda. It is then that politicians often jump on board and say they were always there in the first place. So after the fight over the transmission line, I got involved first at the legislature and then moved to the Public Utilities Commission. The Public Utilities Commission is a really, really strange animal because very few people understand it, including lawyers and engineers. And I've represented Life of the Land in 30-odd contested case proceedings. I'm happy to see Puna Pono jump into their first PUC issue. Puna Pono has just intervened in the integrated resource planning docket before the PUC. And I want to talk a little bit about that. One person asked here, why do we have, shouldn't all the information be public? And for whatever reason, it isn't. But when you enter a docket before the Public Utilities Commission, you have to sign a statement saying you can't disclose certain information, but everything is made available to those who do intervene. So you can influence the outcome of an event at the Public Utilities Commission. You also get the right to ask other parties questions that they have to give answers to. You also get to go before an evidentiary hearing where you can put on your witnesses and explain your case, and you can cross-examine their witnesses and their case. It was under cross-examination of 12 witnesses in 2006 that I asked them about climate change, asked HECO about climate change. And some of the early witnesses said, you know, aren't there two sides of that issue? And others said, you know, it's just not my kuleana. And each of the witnesses were watching the PUC and their staff, and they were like shaking their heads and saying, can you believe these morons? And the 12th HECO witness, a vice president, got up and said, okay, it's real. We're part of the problem. We're part of the solution. So you can have an impact before the Public Utilities Commission. Now, you have two opportunities. The first is what's called integrated resource planning, where the HECO, MECO, and HELCO have spent $6 million over the last year developing scenarios of what the future might look like and their 5-year action plan. And this plan was just submitted to the PUC on June 28th, and it got sort of universal rejection by a lot of people. Mainstream people found it objectionable. For example, one thing that we've heard a lot is that people want to put solar on their roofs. And you might consider solar energy on roofs to be a resource that could meet the load. Because if you need new generation, just count up how many roofs you need and how much solar you need and encourage people to put it on. Well, Hawaiian Electric said, no, we won't look at that issue. Another issue that I was really surprised, for the last several years, we've heard about smart grids and how the utility wants to put computer nodes everywhere and telecommunication nodes everywhere and know the minute changes at every intersection of their grid. And so the Public Utilities Commission asked them for a cost-benefit analysis in this plan, and they said, no. So the plan is meeting a lot of skepticism, and that's really good, because now until mid part of next week, groups can intervene in the docket, become parties in the docket, and ask questions and get answers from the utility. It's great to be able to approach the utility and say, I have a question. It's really interesting to put it in writing and get their response in writing and be able to show people this is what they have in writing. The second issue is the geothermal RFP. So, during the RFP process, you're not allowed to know who is bidding on the contracts. You're not allowed to know who HELCO is selected as the winner until the winner is chosen. You don't know what the costs are. You don't know where the other geographical locations are. But after HELCO signs a contract with a geothermal producer, they have to bring the contract to the Public Utilities Commission for approval. At that point, different parties can intervene in the docket. Interveners have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, so certain documents are confidential, but the interveners will know who bid, they'll be able to see the other bids, they'll be able to see the costs, they'll be able to see the locations, and they can organize people around the issues involved. So the integrated resource planning and the geothermal dockets before the PUC are really key. They're really powerful. Now, the utilities fear solar for a reason. The last 6 years, HECO, MECO, and HELCO have had a drop in demand each year. How do you think a drop in demand matches the need for new generation? The new generation is needed only under one condition. They can drive up the demand by getting new businesses here and by limiting people having the right to have solar. This issue is scaring utilities across the nation. The New York Times had an article yesterday that said that utilities across the nation have suddenly realized they have a problem with solar. The problem is that while solar is still only about 1% of all the energy produced in the country, around the world in the last 10 years, the growth rate per year worldwide for the last 10 years, the growth rate is 44% a year. It has grown 37-fold in 10 years. So the utilities see the writing on the wall. And in fact, Hawaiian Electric, in filing a document with the Securities and Exchange Commission last year, said, our business might be obsolete and we might go out of business. So the best way of fighting geothermal is to find more and more people who don't need to be attached to the grid. And there are actually two great mechanisms. First, right now, there are companies that are willing to come in and supply all of the upfront cost and to sign 20-year contracts with people, levelized cost for solar on rooftops. I know on Oahu, I know of a couple that got it at 23 cents a kilowatt hour. So they have a set amount of load at 23 cents a kilowatt hour for the next 20 years. They only buy from the utility what they need above that. Second, starting in January this year, next year, 2014, there will be a mechanism on your utility bill where you can put in solar on your roof and decrease your energy bill and pay it off by paying lower for your electricity. You both get a lower rate, and part of your rate goes to pay for the rooftop system. So it will further drive down demand. But the method that we're approaching is, why not just cut the ties to the grid in the first place? Because the cost of electricity in states across the nation range from 8 cents to 19 cents a kilowatt hour, and since our rates are more than double that, it is now cost effective to put in solar and a battery, and you save money by disconnecting from the grid. So these are the arguments that we're going to be raising before the Public Utilities Commission in the Integrated Resource Planning docket. We also filed a motion to intervene in the cable docket. The PUC has opened up a docket to look at the inter-island cable from Oahu to Maui. Now, there are many reasons to oppose a cable, but the particular issue that we're jumping in on is the cable is proposed to go through the Hawaii Humpback Whale Sanctuary between Molokai and Lanai. And while electromagnetic fields may or may not impact people, and there's a lot of speculation both ways, federal agencies have asserted that there is no lack of data on marine species, that whales and sharks and eels and dolphins and some fish, EMF affects their navigation, communication, detection of prey, and search for food. And that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric, NOAA, whatever, I get that always wrong. NOAA has said that they have major concerns, both short-term impacts and long-term impacts. And U.S. Fish and Wildlife has said that you should use the precautionary principle. So in other words, if there's another alternative, why not look at it? And rooftop solar does not have the same impacts. So we think we can get to really probe DBED and find out why they have been so hostile to alternatives. Why, for example, when the U.S. Department of Energy has pointed out that Oahu has all the solar it needs to supply its own power. We have plenty of wind, we have biomass. Why do we need the cable? The only reason we need the cable is if you wanted to take 6 different grids that we have now where you can test different ideas on 6 different grids and merge them into one grid so you have less to test with. Makes no sense unless you're a developer who has a lot of money. We know one group that wants to build the cable is NextEra, Nextera. They have $64 billion in assets and owns Florida Power and Light, and would like to come here and build our cable for us and leave. We think they should leave before they build the cable. I've also been asked by some people, what about microgrids? Why can't we just string together communities and that way share power within communities, but do away with the big grid? That issue right now is complicated because if you put a line across a tax map key or across a road, you become a public utility. And so we just need to change the law with that, and perhaps our senator, we can help get legislation through that would allow micro utilities to exist in small communities.